Hi, I'm Charles Evans, and I'm just going to do you a few little bits and pieces with watercolour pencils, because watercolour pencils are a bit of a mysterious medium. They're lovely, especially when you're outdoors on location doing drawings. Take your watercolour pencils with you and do colour drawings. And then when you come home, wet them and you've got a colour painting. Easy. And I just love these things. I'm starting off, for instance, bushy trees. Bushy trees. Look, there's a bit of yellow. This one, they have some funny names, by the way, watercolour pencils. This one is gold ochre. And I'm putting a bit of gold ochre on there. Just drawing, scribbling. This is just like a kid's drawing. A few scribbly bits there. And a bit more there. Now we'll have a little bit of a light green, this one, and this one is moss green. Incidentally, the watercolour pencils that I use are Lyra watercolour pencils, and it's the Lyra Rembrandt, and they're lovely pencils. Nice and vibrant in colour. Bit of that, bit of green. Now we'll have a little bit of a darker green, which is sap green. Bit of that there. And the other thing about watercolour pencils is the strength of colour that you put on. This is dependent on how hard you press on. So just like any drawing, if you want a darker, harder line, press on harder. If you want a stronger, darker colour, press on harder. Look at that. It's as simple as that. They are so usable, these things. I love them. Bit of that, and I'm just scribbling. It's a mess. And now a very, very dark green, which is called night green. Dark green, night green. Look how dark that is. It's got quite a blue tinge to it as well, look. Bit there, bit there. Scribble, scribble, scribble. And now all I need to do, like I say, if you're outdoors on location, draw your drawing, then go back home where you feel more comfortable and just wet it. And you can come back weeks later and wet it. Just with my number 8 round brush, I'm stippling on and merging the colours up. Like that. Not like that, just like that. Bit there. So I've got leaving a bit of light showing with that gold ochre. Now move it around a little bit. Create a few little bobbly bits of hedges there. When it's wet, it's just watercolour on the paper. So treat it just as watercolour. And if you want to move it around while it's wet, move it around. If I wanted some trees coming out of there, pick it up there. Draw a few bits in here, like so, with the tip of my brush. Pick up some more paint, pop some up there. So user-friendly, these things. Love them. You can go in with some darker, if you wish, afterwards. Get a little bit of the night green. I think that's night green, is it? Yep. Also a little bit of that in there, look. Press on. And that you can just leave as a mark because it's wet pencil. Aren't they lovely? I so adore these things. Just moving paint around. Pop a bit up there. So simple. Like, for instance, a tree trunk. A lot of people have a problem with a tree trunk, getting a rounded effect to the tree trunk, because that can be quite difficult and very, very scary. Don't be scared. Again, we'll have a bit of gold ochre, and I've got a little bit of dark sepia on this one. There. Bit of gold ochre. We'll have the light coming from the left on this tree trunk. Now, a little bit of dark sepia. Like that. Very dark. And I'll have a little bit of normal sepia, which is, no, it's Van Dyke Brown. Like I said, they've got some very silly names. Bit of that in there as well. So I've got 3 colours going on there. And I've got a light, a dark, and a mid-tone. Now to get that rounded look to a tree trunk, very, very simple. You've got the colour on the paper, just wet it, merge it. Watch. And I'm bringing the dark into the light. And there's a bit of a tree trunk. But already you're getting a rounded look because the dark is running into the light, giving you that rounded effect. Stroke down here. Now, if I wanted a few tree twigs coming out of that, while it's wet, pick up the paint, bring some outlook. Watercolour pencils, beautiful things. How easy is that? Tree trunk. All you need to do is add some foliage. Do it like that. Or, watercolour pencils are good for things that you find difficult in a painting. So if you've done a watercolour painting and you find something really scary, like for instance, painting people. I'll have some black here. Painting people is quite scary. So we'll have a bit of black. Like so. Now I'll have a bit of red. Just drawing on. Now a bit of bright green. Bit of green there. Back to black. Ah, that's the song. Back to black. Bit of that. Bit there. Now, to be honest, if you make these small enough in your landscape, you don't even need to wet them. It is watercolour, don't forget, even though it's a pencil, it's watercolour. And you can just leave it like that if it's small, middle distance in your picture. But you've got the ultimate control of being able to draw with a pencil. If you want to wet them, just tap on, soften that paint. There. There. Bring it into the black. A bit more there. And again, it just becomes watercolour on your paper and therefore part of your picture. People. So, so simple. Do you want them walking the dog? Yeah, that's them walking the dog. Black Labrador, this one. There's a square. It's a square. With a small square inset. A couple of sticks underneath. Tail on top. There you go. Black Labrador. So easy. They're such fun. But that's the way you should think about them. They are fun. Enjoy experimenting with them. Because when you enjoy experimenting, that's when you get some really good results. A bit of land and ground underneath them. There you go. A couple walking their Black Labrador. So, so simple. What I want to do now, I'm just going to change this piece of paper over and do a little painting. Because here's another really invaluable tip. Before I change the paper over, a really invaluable tip, and it's about skies. Because people with watercolour pencils and skies, it can be a bit of a nightmare. Because the first thing you do, 9 times out of 10, is draw your sky on. See that? Then you wet it. And it's never going to be a sky, because there's always going to be some scrapey marks. You're not going to get rid of all of those by doing it that way. I'll show you the way to do them in this little picture that I do next. So now, I've got a new piece of paper. We'll have a little picture, a quick and easy little picture. What I'm going to do, we'll have some hills to start with. Here's a bit of the gold ochre again. And I'm just kind of like shaping the outline of the hills with the gold ochre, like so. You'll have to bear with me because I'm making this bit up as I'm going along. This is a scene out of my head. So a little bit of gold ochre. Now I'll have a little bit of moss green, and I'm not pressing on very hard. Level it up at the bottom, look, down there. A lot of colours going in here. I'm going to take a bit of that moss green into the gold ochre as well, because that's another thing. You can mix the colour on the paper. A bit here. Now, a little bit of Prussian blue, just a little bit, down here. A bit there. A little bit of Venetian red. Get some red in there, nice and warm. Not much, just a bit. And I'm not pressing on too hard either. A little bit more blue, I think. Just a little bit down there. And I've pressed on a little bit harder now. It's like I said, the darker the mark, harder you press on. The darker the colour, harder you press on, in the case of watercolour pencils. Now that bit of blue that I've just put in there, eventually will split the two hills apart. Bit of that there. That'll do. Now, Prussian blue, which I'm in with. This is what I was talking about, doing a sky. Don't scribble on, then wet it and hope that it's going to be a sky. It's not. It's going to be a bit of a scribbly mess. So, another way of using watercolour pencils, get your brush, and in my case here, it's a 3/4 inch Aquafine wash brush, flat wash brush. All I'm doing, take the paint off the pencil, like so. Then paint on. And then you've got a sky. But the other thing is, now that's on there, it's just wet watercolour. And so just treat it like any normal watercolour painting. Take my sky in behind the hills there. And now, if I want some clouds in that lot, just wash my brush out, squeeze out, take a few clouds out, look. Just like a watercolour, because that's what it is. Now, wash out, squeeze out, clean damp brush, make a colour for the hills on the paper. Make the colour on the paper, look. Wash this down. Now bring that up a little bit. Again, clean damp brush. Wash that. I'm merging the colours together as I'm going along. And by the way, the sky wash is still wet. Now you see what I'm talking about? I've now got two different hills because of that blue that I drew in before. So simple. Now if you wanted that to be kind of like a lake, draw a bit of colour down there, look. Like so. Just drawing colour down. Pick a bit of paint up there, draw a bit down. Isn't that simple? Now, another little tip about painting with watercolour pencils. You've just seen me make a colour for the hills by drawing it on and then merging it on the paper. Another way of doing it, we'll have my cobalt blue again, sorry, my Prussian blue again, and a little bit of the Venetian red. Yeah, that'll do. You can also mix a colour on your brush. Get some blue, get a bit of Venetian red, just a touch of Venetian red, bit more water, and there's another colour mixed on the brush. And again, a bit more blue, just blue. Isn't that simple? Again, mixing on the brush. You can either draw on and then wet it, or you can mix on the brush. We'll have a bit of green here. This is the sap green. Look. Have a bit of the sepia. Bit more green. Just drawing on. Now. Take some green into the brown. Now, a little bit of my blue again. Instantly, that's the blue that I've just wet with my brush. Look, ready for drawing again. If it's not ready for drawing, just get a quick wipe. And it's ready. A little bit more there. A bit there. A few flicky bits there. And again, just wet it. There's loads and loads of different ways of using watercolour pencils. You can mix a different colour on the brush by stroking one, then stroking another one. You can mix the colour on the paper, like I did with the hills. You can just take paint off the brush, like I did for the sky. Lots of different ways. There. Flick up, there. Grass. And there we go. Watercolour pencils, such a beautiful and adaptable medium. Lovely.